Hello, my name is Denise Eide with The Logic of English. Today we're going to talk about handwriting instruction. Handwriting instruction is very important not just for forming legible letters and being able to write legibly, but for preventing confusion and reversals in reading as well as writing for students. It's a very vital part for students learning to read because handwriting is actually the kinesthetic experience of letters and of words. I recommend when we begin to teach students to write that we begin with cursive first. Now this is very different from most schools and programs today, and I want to give a little explanation as to why. This is not a make it or break it point. You can still begin with manuscript first, and in this presentation we will demonstrate both cursive and manuscript letter formation. However, I recommend beginning with cursive because it is less fine motor skill intensive. If you take a moment and write the word teacher in both cursive and in manuscript, you will notice that when you write in cursive, the letters are all connected and it uses less fine motor skills. When you write in manuscript, you will notice that you have to keep picking up your pencil and replacing it to form each letter. Now, young students are fine motor skill challenged, so when we ask them to begin with manuscript, we actually are asking them to do the thing that is more difficult. This is because cursive was designed for the human hand, whereas manuscript was designed for the printing press. When we begin handwriting instruction, it is also important that we begin by teaching large motor skill movements. In this way, students create a very clear picture of the motions needed to form each letter. Large motor movements begin from the elbow. Fine motor movements are going to happen in just the fingers. The brain does not differentiate between how to form those shapes, so you'll be able to translate a large motor movement to a fine motor movement as long as you have good fine motor skills. It's also important that we teach students to develop the muscle memory needed to form each letter. We want them to develop the rhythm of handwriting. That is why we call our handwriting program the rhythm of handwriting. We want them to develop fluid motions where they only stop where necessary based on the rhythm, the natural rhythm of those letters. Now, most handwriting programs actually begin with tracing. They have those little dot-to-dot activities. And they've shown with computers that students, when they do that, are not forming muscle memory for the rhythm of forming each of those letters. Instead, they're using their vision and connecting those dots and jerking along. So when teaching handwriting, it's important to emphasize the rhythm and give explicit instructions on how to form each phonogram. This is the phonogram I, E, Y. Now notice we begin by introducing the phonograms using the phonogram card, which is in book face. For your information, I, E, Y may be surprising to you that it says 4 sounds, but it says I as in it, I as in ivy, E as in stadium, and Y as in onion. I don't share that information of example words with young students. However, I will tell them all 4 sounds right from the beginning because this will be necessary for them when learning to read. Once we have introduced the phonogram using the phonogram card, we then can move to the handwriting chart. Now, I explained to students that the handwriting chart is like a piece of paper that's been enlarged, and we will begin teaching handwriting using our pointer fingers and large muscle or large motor skill movements. I will introduce that this is the baseline, this is the midline, and this is the top line. Then I will give them explicit instructions on how to form each letter. And we will step through the instructions one step at a time and have the student repeat those instructions and demonstrate that they have mastered them. So with the cursive letters, each of the letters begins on the baseline. So we will begin on the baseline, swing up to the midline. And then I would have the student demonstrate. Begin on the baseline, swing up to the midline. The next step is begin on the baseline, swing up to the midline, down to the baseline. And I would have the student again demonstrate. Then begin on the baseline, swing up to the midline, down to the baseline, pick up your pencil, dot. And once the student can demonstrate to me while telling back the instructions of exactly how to form the letter, I then move to the shortened directions. In the rhythm of handwriting, each of the phonograms has shortened instructions that are in bold on how to form each letter. So for I, E, Y, it would look like this. Swing, down, dot. Now notice when we say swing down dot, it emphasizes the rhythm and the natural motions needed to write fluidly and legibly. Let's try another one. This is the phonogram a, aw. And I would have the students repeat a, aw. And then we would show them how to write it on the phonogram chart. So it begins on the baseline, curve up to the midline, roll back around to the baseline, swing up to the midline, down to the baseline. Okay, so I would have, for the student, broken up each direction and asked them to repeat them back as we did with the first one. And then it becomes shortened after they've mastered those. Curve, roll, swing, down. Curve, roll, swing, down. And you notice how the student then begins to have the rhythm of those letters emphasized as they practice them. When we teach manuscript, it's important that we pair it closely to the directions that we actually used to teach cursive. Or if we're teaching manuscript first, that we pair the cursive directions closely to the manuscript letters, because they are very closely related, and therefore we can take the common elements and make the transition much simpler for students. So once again, when I'm teaching manuscript, I will use the handwriting chart. I will bring it back out. We will practice forming with large motor skills. And let's look at the phonogram I, E. With manuscript, we will always need to give students the direction of where the phonogram begins. So with I, E, it begins right on the midline. So the directions go, begin on the midline, down to the baseline, pick up your pencil, dot. And then it simply becomes down, dot, as they are able to clearly demonstrate that they understand how to form the phonogram. We can also practice a, ah with manuscript. Here we will tell them begin just below the midline, roll around to the baseline, swing up to the midline, down to the baseline. So it becomes put your pencil just below the midline, roll, swing, down. A, ah. These are a few of the principles on how to teach handwriting using the rhythm of handwriting. Once students have become familiar with the way to form each phonogram using the handwriting chart, you can then use something like sandpaper letters. These are great for young students. They're very, very tactile, and they can practice writing them. I sometimes like to have treasure hunts with the young students with these, where I'll hide them around the room, and I'll ask them to find them, and as they bring them to me, I'll have them write it and tell me the sounds of that phonogram. In the Logic of English handwriting programs, we also have enlarged phonograms on each page, and students can practice this way as well. They don't have the same sensory experience as the sandpaper letters, but they're still an excellent way to reinforce the large motor skill. You'll also notice that in the Rhythm of Handwriting program, we have variable size lines, and these are very important because some students write better on small lines and some students write better on large lines, even young students. In fact, young students have very, very small hands, so many of those students write better tiny because they're not needing to stretch as to if they were writing on those really large lines that are often given in kindergarten programs. For further information about handwriting instruction and how to teach reading and spelling, see us at www.logicoфenglish.com.